Commander Valen Ristock stared through the observation deck at the approaching human fleet, her mandibles clicking with barely contained amusement. The hegemony's massive dreadnoughts, each the size of a small moon, loomed behind her, their weapon systems humming with energy that could vaporize continents. "Is this truly all they send?" Admiral Kreth growled, his 12 eyes blinking in sequence. 17 vessels against our armada of 300, Tactical Officer Mezix brought up the holographic display. The largest human ship measures only 1/8 the size of our smallest cruiser. Their energy signatures suggest minimal weapons capacity. They appear to have committed only a token defensive force. Valen's exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lights as she circled the tactical display. The hegemony had conquered 17 star systems in the past solar cycle. The humans, with their single homeworld and handful of colonies, were merely the next species to be subjugated for the glory of the unified worlds. "Perhaps they've come to negotiate surrender terms," suggested diplomatic liaison Jezik, the smallest of the command staff. "Not according to our intelligence," countered Mezix. "The human communication channels we've intercepted suggest they believe they can actually defend against us." This triggered a wave of chittering laughter across the command deck. "Arrogance, before extinction," Admiral Kreth declared. "A common trait among primitive species." Meanwhile, aboard the lead human vessel Ingenuity, Captain Rael Kovac observed the hegemony fleet with calculated calm. The 17 ships of Task Force Myrmidon maintained their precise formation, each vessel's quantum engines pulsing in perfect synchronization. "They're scanning us," reported Lieutenant Econ Okafor, his fingers dancing across the adaptive interface. "Standard spectral analysis, just as we expected." "And they're seeing exactly what we want them to see," Rael replied. She turned to address the bridge crew. "Everyone remember, the hegemony has never encountered a species that developed quantum-fold technology before achieving interstellar travel. They've conquered worlds through brute force and overwhelming numbers." Chief Engineer Ilari Neves looked up from her station. "The Nexus web is stable across all vessels, phase locking at 99.8% efficiency." "Perfect," Rael said, the hint of a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "Initiate Operation Matryoshka. On my mark." Back on the hegemony command ship, Valen noticed something peculiar about the human formation. Why are they arranging themselves in that pattern? It offers no defensive advantage. Before Mezix could respond, the sensor array erupted with warnings. "Energy spike," the tactical officer shouted. "The human vessels are—" The 17 human ships suddenly began to glow with brilliant blue light, each vessel becoming the nexus of a rapidly expanding energy field. The fields merged, creating a single massive resonance pattern that engulfed the entire formation. "What is this?" Admiral Kreth demanded. The answer came in the form of a blinding flash, as the space between the hegemony fleet and the human vessels seemed to fold in upon itself. And then, emerging from the quantum distortion like ghosts materializing from mist, came not 17, but 1,700 human warships, each identical to the original 17, but now revealed to be merely the control nodes of a vastly larger armada. The last thing Valen saw before the first salvo hit was the realization that the hegemony had made a grave miscalculation. These weren't primitive vessels at all. They were something entirely new. Admiral Kreth's command deck descended into chaos as officers scrambled to make sense of the tactical displays. What had appeared to be 17 modest vessels had somehow multiplied into a vast fleet that now surrounded the hegemony forces on all sides. "Impossible!" Kreth roared. "This defies all known physics!" Tactical Officer Mezix frantically recalibrated the sensors, his appendages trembling. The readings suggest these aren't physical vessels in the conventional sense. They're quantum echoes, but they're registering as solid matter with full weapon capabilities. "Echoes don't fire plasma torpedoes," Valen shouted, as the first wave of human attacks slammed into the hegemony's outer defense perimeter. 3 dreadnoughts exploded simultaneously, their shields collapsing under coordinated fire from dozens of directions. What the hegemony couldn't comprehend was the revolutionary technology at work. Each of the original 17 human ships contained a quantum resonance core, the culmination of humanity's desperate innovation during the 50 years since they'd first detected the approaching hegemony fleet. Aboard the Ingenuity, Captain Rael watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. "Phase 2, she ordered. "Initiate fractal expansion." Lieutenant Okafor relayed the command through the Nexus web that connected all 17 control ships, targeting their command vessels and primary weapon platforms. The human fleet's formation shifted, the quantum echoes realigning into a complex geometric pattern that puzzled the hegemony tacticians. What they didn't realize was that this wasn't merely a formation, it was a physical manifestation of a quantum algorithm. On the hegemony flagship, Valen watched in horror as her vessel's weapon systems began to malfunction. "Our targeting arrays are failing. Engineering reports that our power cores are destabilizing." "It's some kind of interference field," Mezix reported. "The human vessels are generating quantum disturbances that are affecting our systems at the subatomic level." The truth was more elegant. The human fleet wasn't merely firing conventional weapons, they were manipulating the quantum substrate of space itself. Each Echo vessel served as a node in a vast quantum computer, collectively calculating and executing localized space-time distortions that rendered hegemony technology increasingly unreliable. Dr. Ilara Voss, the architect of the quantum resonance core technology, monitored the battle from her station deep within the Ingenuity. "The entropic field is expanding exactly as predicted," she reported to Captain Rael. "Their power systems are being forced into quantum decoherence." "Casualties?" Rael asked, her voice steady but concerned. "None so far. The Echo vessels are absorbing most of the return fire." Ilara adjusted her glasses, studying the holographic display. "But the strain on the QR cores is mounting. We'll need to proceed to Phase 3 within the next 12 minutes before system degradation becomes critical." Outside, the battlefield had transformed into a dazzling light show of weapons fire and quantum distortions. The hegemony fleet tried to adapt, firing blindly into the swarm of Echo vessels, only to find their targets would momentarily phase out of normal spacetime before reappearing elsewhere. Admiral Kreth pounded his command console in frustration. "Launch all fighters. Target those original 17 vessels." But as the hegemony fighter squadrons deployed, they encountered another surprise. The human Echo vessels began to split and multiply further, each division creating smaller but equally lethal craft that swarmed the hegemony fighters in overwhelming numbers. "Sir," Valen reported, her voice trembling, "I believe we may have severely underestimated human technology. These aren't conventional warships, they're something entirely new." As if to punctuate her assessment, 3 more hegemony dreadnoughts erupted in brilliant explosions, their massive hulls torn apart by weapons that seemed to ignore their shields entirely. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Kreth felt something unfamiliar: doubt. 3 hours into the battle, the hegemony's numerical advantage had evaporated. What remained of their once proud armada, now huddled in defensive formation, their hulking vessels no longer symbols of intimidation, but desperate survivors trying to weather an unprecedented storm. Aboard the Ingenuity, Captain Rael Kovac monitored her crew with concern. The revolutionary quantum technology that had given humanity its edge was taking a toll on the men and women operating it. "Status report," she called, noticing the strain on Lieutenant Okafor's face as he maintained the neural link to the fleets. "Nexus Web. Echo fleet stability at 73% and declining," he responded, sweat beading on his forehead. "The quantum coherence is requiring more processing power than anticipated." Dr. Ilara Voss approached the command chair, her voice low. The human brain can only handle quantum calculations for so long before neural fatigue sets in. We're pushing the navigators beyond what we tested in simulations. This was the aspect of human warfare the hegemony could never have predicted. While their ships operated on automated systems managed by minimal crews, each human echo vessel required a navigator, a specially trained operator whose augmented brain interfaced directly with the quantum systems, guiding the echo's movements with intuition no AI could match. In the navigation chamber below decks, 34 men and women lay in neural interface cradles, their minds projecting into the quantum battlefield while their bodies remained behind. Each navigator controlled dozens of echo vessels simultaneously, a feat that merged human creativity with quantum physics in ways the hegemony scientists had never imagined possible. Navigator Prime Dante Reeves, a former theoretical physicist who'd volunteered for the experimental program, coordinated the neural network from his central position. Despite the bleeding nose and pounding headache, he maintained his focus, directing the complex dance of quantum echoes with the precision of a symphony conductor. Echo Group 7, reinforce the eastern quadrant, he communicated through the neural link. Groups 3 and 12, prepare for dimensional shift on my mark. Back on the command deck, Rael made a difficult decision. Begin rotating the navigators. 4-minute shifts. Captain, Dr. Voss protested. Breaking the neural connection prematurely could destabilize the Echo fleet. And pushing them beyond, their limits will collapse it entirely, Rael countered. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology, Doctor. It's our ability to adapt. Meanwhile, in the rapidly shrinking hegemony formation, Admiral Kreth and his officers had finally begun to understand what they were facing. The human vessels aren't multiplying, they're projections, Valen explained, having analyzed the battle data. Quantum reflections controlled by the original 17 ships. That's why our sensors detected minimal crew aboard each vessel. How is this possible? Kreth demanded. They've developed technology that harnesses quantum uncertainty principles, Mezix theorized. These echo vessels exist in a state of quantum superposition, both real and unreal simultaneously until they interact with our ships. Jezik, the diplomatic officer, spoke quietly from his corner of the command deck. The Archivist Collective warned us about humanity. They said humans possessed unusual cognitive patterns, an ability to conceptualize the impossible and then make it reality. Kreth's 12 eyes narrowed. An ability that won't save them. Target all firepower on the original 17 vessels. Ignore the echoes. As the hegemony forces reoriented their attack, the human fleet underwent another transformation. The echo vessels began to merge and reshape, forming larger, more complex structures that defied conventional spacecraft design. What are they doing now? Valen asked, watching the display with growing dread. The answer came as the restructured human fleet revealed the next evolution of their strategy, and the true reason why humans had sent only 17 physical ships against an armada of hundreds. The hegemony's concentrated attack on the 17 original human vessels should have ended the battle. By all conventional military wisdom, destroying the control nodes would collapse the Echo fleet. But conventional wisdom had ceased to apply the moment humanity entered the battlefield. As hegemony weapons fire converged on the Ingenuity and its 16 sister ships, something remarkable happened. The quantum echoes surrounding each vessel coalesced, forming shimmering barriers of semi-substantial energy that absorbed and dispersed the incoming attacks. Shield integrity holding at 82%, reported Lieutenant Okafor, his mind still partially immersed in the Nexus web. The Echo vessels are sacrificing themselves to protect us. Captain Rael nodded grimly. As designed, begin final convergence. Across the battlefield, the remaining Echo vessels began a carefully choreographed movement, shifting into an enormous spherical formation that enclosed both the human control ships and the remaining hegemony fleet. From outside, it would have appeared as if a giant blue-white bubble of energy had suddenly enveloped the entire battle zone. Inside the sphere, the laws of physics began to change. On the Hegemony flagship, alarms blared as sensors detected the transformation. "Spatial distortion increasing exponentially," Mezix shouted. "The local gravitational constant is shifting." Valen stared at her instruments in disbelief. "They're creating a pocket universe, a self-contained bubble of altered space-time. This was the true purpose of Operation Matryoshka, named after the Russian nesting dolls. The Echo fleet wasn't primarily a weapon. It was the framework for the largest quantum engineering project in human history. In the navigation chamber aboard the Ingenuity, the navigators were now working in perfect synchronization. They're augmented, minds linked not just to each other but to the quantum fabric itself. Navigator Prime Dante Reeves had blood streaming from both nostrils now, but his eyes burned with fierce concentration as he guided the process. "Phase lock complete," he reported through the neural interface. "Dimensional inversion in 3, 2, 1. The space within the quantum sphere inverted, creating what physicists called a Klein bottle topology, a space that was simultaneously inside and outside itself. The Hegemony ships suddenly found themselves trapped in a bubble of space where their conventional engines and weapons operated under different physical constants. Admiral Kreth watched in horror as his mighty vessels began to drift powerlessly. "What have they done to us?" "They've changed the rules," Valen whispered, understanding dawning on her. "In this pocket of space, our technology doesn't work the same way." Aboard the Ingenuity, Captain Rael opened a communication channel to the Hegemony flagship. The holographic projection of Admiral Kreth appeared before her, his 12 eyes blinking rapidly in distress. "This is Captain Rael Kovacs of Earth. Defense Force," she stated calmly. "Your fleet is now contained within a quantum isolation field. Your weapons are ineffective, your engines cannot generate sufficient thrust to move, and your communication systems cannot penetrate the barrier." "What do you want?" Kreth demanded, mandibles clicking furiously. "The unconditional surrender of the Hegemony forces and recognition of humanity's sovereign territory, including all colonized worlds and unclaimed systems within 50 light-years of Earth." "Impossible. The Hegemony does not—" "The alternative," Rael continued, "is that we collapse the quantum field with your fleet still inside it. The resulting spatial compression would be unfortunate for your vessels." To demonstrate, she nodded to Lieutenant Okafor, who directed a small portion of the Echo fleet to constrict around a single Hegemony frigate at the edge of the formation. The vessel crumpled like paper as space itself compressed around it. In the tense silence that followed, Dr. Ilara Voss approached the captain's chair and spoke softly. "The navigators can't maintain the field indefinitely, 15 minutes at most before neural collapse." Rael kept her expression neutral, not wanting the Hegemony to detect the precariousness of their position. The quantum technology that had given them this victory was pushing human physiology to its breaking point. On the Hegemony flagship, Valen pulled Admiral Kreth aside. "The human vessels are showing signs of power fluctuation," she reported quietly. "I believe their technology is unstable. If we stall, their advantage may collapse on its own." Kreth considered this, but then shook his massive head. "No. Look at what they've accomplished with just 17 true ships. This is not a species to be underestimated any further." He turned back to the communication display. "We accept your terms, Captain Kovacs. The Hegemony will withdraw from human space." As the formal surrender proceeded, no one in the Hegemony fleet realized how close the humans had come to failure, or that the greatest strength of humanity wasn't their quantum technology, but rather the sheer audacity that had led them to attempt such an improbable strategy in the first place. 3 days after the surrender, the 17 vessels of Task Force Myrmidon limped back toward Earth space. The Quantum Echo fleet had dissipated, leaving only the original ships, now bearing the scars of battle and carrying crews pushed beyond normal human endurance. In the medical bay of the Ingenuity, Dr. Ilara Voss moved solemnly between the rows. of recovery pods containing the navigators. 28 men and women lay in various states of consciousness, their neural pathways recovering from the unprecedented strain of quantum navigation. "How are they?" Captain Rael asked, entering the medical bay after completing her final report to Earth Command. "Stable," Ilara replied, her voice heavy with exhaustion and concern. "The neural degradation has stopped progressing, but recovery will be slow. Dante is still unresponsive." They paused beside Navigator Prime Dante Reeves' pod. The man who had coordinated the entire quantum battle lay motionless, neural monitors showing minimal brain activity. "He knew the risks," Riel said softly. "They all did." "Knowing and experiencing are different things," Ilara countered, adjusting Dante's medication. "We pushed this technology into deployment before it was ready because we had no choice." The captain couldn't argue with that assessment. When long-range sensors had first detected the hegemony Armada approaching human space 50 years ago, the initial panic had eventually given way to the greatest technological mobilization in Earth's history. Conventional weapons would have been useless against the overwhelming numbers of the alien fleet, so humanity had pursued the unconventional, the seemingly impossible. Quantum resonance technology had emerged from the desperation of those years. The theory had existed for decades, but practical application had remained elusive until Dr. Voss and her team achieved their breakthrough just 3 years before the hegemony's arrival. "The Defense Council is already talking about mass production," Rael noted. "They want 1,000 control ships built within 5 years. Ilara's expression hardened. "With what navigators? We barely had enough trained personnel for 17 vessels. The neural augmentation process alone takes years, and even then, only 1 in 20 candidates can successfully interface with the quantum systems." Before Rael could respond, her communication implant chimed. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the archivist vessel that's been shadowing us. They're requesting permission to dock." The archivists, a neutral species known for documenting the histories and technologies of all spacefaring civilizations, had observed the battle from a safe distance. Their presence wasn't unexpected. They appeared wherever significant events unfolded. "Permission granted," Rael replied. "Direct them to Auxiliary Docking Bay 3. 2 hours later, Captain Rael and Dr. Voss stood face-to-face with Archivist Tenzin, a tall, slender being whose translucent skin revealed the complex network of neural pathways beneath. A biological library containing thousands of years of collected knowledge. "We have witnessed a paradigm shift," Tenzin stated, its melodious voice translating through the ship's communication system. "In all our records, spanning 26,000 cycles of observation, no species has developed quantum manipulation technology before achieving stable interstellar civilization." "Necessity breeds innovation," Rael responded. "We had no choice but to leapfrog conventional development." The archivist's inner lights pulsed thoughtfully. "Yet you must understand the implications. The hegemony has ruled this sector for millennia. Through force, you have demonstrated that quality can defeat quantity. Intellect can overcome brute strength. This changes the balance of power throughout known space." "That wasn't our intention," Dr. Voss said. "We only wanted to defend our homes." "Intentions rarely align with outcomes," Tenzin observed. "The Hegemony Council is already facing internal rebellion. 3 subjugated species have declared independence since news of your victory spread. The established order is crumbling." Rael felt the weight of those words. What had been intended as a desperate defensive measure had inadvertently triggered a galactic revolution. "There's more," the archivist continued. "Our analysis of your quantum technology indicates that its continued use risks creating permanent instabilities in the fabric of space-time. The pocket universe you created has not fully collapsed. It remains as a spreading ripple in the quantum substrate." Dr. Voss paled. "That's not possible. The field should have dissipated when the navigators disconnected. Theory often fails to account for all variables," Tenzin replied. "You have opened a door that cannot be fully closed. Others will attempt to replicate your achievement, likely without understanding the consequences. As the archivist spoke, Captain Riel realized that humanity's moment of triumph had also been a point of no return. They had changed not just the political landscape of the galaxy, but potentially its physical laws as well. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the ripples of that change were just beginning to spread. 5 years after the Battle of Hegemony, the galactic landscape had transformed beyond recognition. The once mighty hegemony had fractured into dozens of independent systems, former subject species now forging their own destinies after centuries of subjugation. Earth had become both celebrated and feared, the homeworld of the species that had toppled an empire with just 17 ships. In the orbital research station, Prometheus, Navigator Prime Dante Reeves sat in his wheelchair beside the observation window, gazing out at the stars. His body had never fully recovered from the neural trauma of the battle, but his mind remained sharp, if altered by his experience. "Beautiful view," commented Captain Ryle Kovacs, now Admiral Kovacs, as she entered the observation deck. Age and responsibility had added silver streaks to her dark hair, but her posture remained as straight as ever. "I see it differently now," Dante replied softly. "Since that day, I see the quantum patterns beneath reality. The stars aren't just points of light to me anymore." Riel nodded, understanding. All the surviving navigators had been changed. By their experience, their perception permanently altered by direct neural contact with quantum states that human minds were never designed to process. "The Council has reached a decision," she said, taking a seat opposite him. "They're decommissioning the quantum resonance program." Dante turned to her, a hint of relief in his eyes. "So Dr. Voss's recommendations were accepted?" "Yes." Her research on the spreading quantum instabilities was too conclusive to ignore. The spatial anomalies around the battle site have grown to cover 3-star systems. We can't risk expanding the affected area. What neither mentioned was the other factor in the Council's decision: the increasing difficulty in finding new navigator candidates. After the truth about the neural damage had become public, volunteers had dwindled to almost nothing. Humanity had gained its freedom, but paid a steep price for the innovation that secured it. "What about the archivist warnings?" Dante asked. "About other species attempting to replicate our technology?" Riel's expression darkened. "We've confirmed at least 3 separate research programs. The former hegemony loyalists have salvaged enough data to make significant progress, and the Krell Consortium has been offering enormous bounties for any human scientists willing to share their knowledge." "Then shutting down our program won't be enough," Dante concluded. "No, it won't." Riel stood and activated a holographic display between them. "That's why the Council has approved Operation Lighthouse." The hologram showed a massive space station, unlike any existing human construction, a spherical structure with a complex lattice of quantum stabilizers extending from its core. "We can't uninvent what we created," Riel explained, "but we can build something to contain its worst effects. The lighthouse will generate a controlled quantum field designed to neutralize the spreading instabilities." Dante studied the design, with his uniquely altered perception. "This will require navigators." "Just one," Riel replied quietly. "A permanent navigator whose consciousness will become part of the station itself." Understanding dawned in Dante's eyes. "You're asking me? You're the only one whose mind has already adapted to prolonged quantum immersion. The others still experience neural degradation with each exposure. You've stabilized in your altered state." Dante turned back to the window, silent for a long moment, as he considered the implications. His physical body was already failing him. The wheelchair was just the most visible sign of damage that continued progressing despite all medical interventions. "How long would the station maintain stability?" he finally asked. "Indefinitely, according to the models. Your consciousness would provide the intuitive guidance that no AI can replicate, adjusting the field as needed to counteract new instabilities as they develop. And the alternative? Rael sighed heavily. According to Dr. Voss's latest projections, without intervention, the quantum fractures will begin affecting inhabited systems within 3 years. By the decade's end, they could render interstellar travel impossible throughout this sector. Dante nodded slowly. So once again, humanity finds itself with no real choice but to push beyond conventional limitations. I wouldn't ask this of you if I know, he interrupted gently. And my answer is yes. This broken body has little time left anyway. If my consciousness can serve a greater purpose. He trailed off, then smiled faintly. Besides, I've always wanted to see the quantum universe from the inside. 6 months later, the lighthouse station pulsed into activation at the heart of the growing quantum instability zone. At its core, Navigator Prime Dante Reeves's consciousness expanded into the quantum substrate, becoming something both more and less than human, a guardian intelligence maintaining the boundaries between normal space and the chaotic potential, unleashed by humanity's desperate innovation. On the observation deck of the Ingenuity, now a diplomatic vessel carrying representatives from 27 species, Admiral Riel Kovac and Dr. Ilara Voss watched as the station's stabilization field bloomed outward, visible as a subtle ripple against the backdrop of stars. "Do you think he's still in there?" Ilara asked quietly. "Still Dante?" "I believe so," Riel replied, "though perhaps in there isn't the right concept anymore." The final neural scans showed his consciousness expanding rather than transferring. The archivist Tenzin approached, its translucent form glowing softly in the dimmed lighting. "In all our records, no species has sacrificed so much to correct its own mistake," it observed. "Most civilizations that discover reality-altering technology destroy themselves before recognizing the consequences. We came close," Rael acknowledged. "Yet you adapted," Tenzin continued. "This is the quality that makes your species unique. Not your technology, but your capacity to recognize its dangers and act accordingly." As they spoke, a message appeared. On Riel's personal communicator, text only with no point of origin, I understand now. "The universe is both simpler and more complex than we ever imagined. Don't worry about me. This isn't an ending, it's a transformation. Tell the others I'm still watching over them." Riel showed the message to Ilara, whose eyes widened. "It's impossible," the scientist whispered. "The station has no conventional communication systems." "Perhaps," Rael suggested with a small smile, "we should stop thinking in terms of what's possible and impossible when it comes to human ingenuity." Outside the viewport, the lighthouse pulsed with blue-white energy, its quantum field gradually restoring stability to the wounded fabric of space. To the dignitaries gathered from across the galaxy, it stood as both a warning and a promise, a testament to a small species from an unremarkable planet who had changed the course of galactic history not through overwhelming numbers but through the uniquely human combination of desperate innovation and willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. And at the heart of the lighthouse, the consciousness that had once been Dante Reeves expanded further, mapping the quantum threads that connected all things, guided by the most human of motivations, to protect, to preserve, and to ensure that the door humanity had inadvertently opened would remain safely guarded for generations to come. The species that had been dismissed as insignificant had proven that sometimes the smallest fleets hide the greatest power, especially when designed by humans.